All right, top 10 wide receivers. Always a bit of a contentious list because let's just be honest, everyone believes that their favorite wide receiver on their team should be a top 10 receiver. It's the joke Kyle and I say on the podcast of there's 30 top 10 receivers because, everyone says, oh, yeah, that guy, easily a top 10 receiver. Like, oh, Drake London, easily a top 10 receiver. When you say that, no one really says, no, he's not. But then when you actually have to make a list, you say, okay, well, I can't actually put him in. So because of that, Drake London not on the list, spoiler alert, but really good player, by the way, is an honorable mention. But let's get into the list, starting off with number 10. I decided to go with Amari Cooper here, who I think was, again, really good last year for the Browns, and it's kind of just been consistently good. That is one thing that some people who don't make this list that I really like, a lot of times it's going to be because they only had like one great year, like Puka Nacua. I ended up just not putting him on the list because it's 1 year. For Cooper, we've seen him do this for a while. There were points where I feel like part of why the Browns offense got better with Flacco in there was Flacco kind of said, oh, hey, this guy over here, he's pretty good. I'm just going to keep throwing him the ball, see how that works. And it worked out pretty well. So, I think Cooper is a really good player who doesn't really get talked about much now that he's with Cleveland, but has maybe even had his best stretch because he usually kind of struggled with consistency. He's been pretty consistent with Cleveland and still has those great games and still isn't even 30 yet, although he's about to turn 30. So, for now, still expecting him to be good. Number 9 on my list is Cooper Kupp. Not coming off his best season, I don't think, and since the incredible 2021 season where he basically led the league in every advanced stat and every non-advanced stat and ended up winning Super Bowl MVP. That's a pretty good, pretty good year, I would say. Hasn't quite been able to do that again, but I still think is really good, and I still think that if you just get him a healthy season, which I don't really feel like injuries were that much of an issue. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't feel like they were that much of an issue prior to 2022. So if you can just get him healthy, I still think he's really good. But I mean, you have to factor in the past 2 years. But again, it's just kind of how deep the wide receiver list is. Cooper Kupp is someone who I think has potential to be the best wide receiver in football next year. It's just, will he do that? Number 8 on my list is Mike Evans, which is maybe a bit of a homer take. I don't know. I don't know if he would make everyone's top 10 list, but he makes mine. Again, I have a Mike Evans jersey. I am not an unbiased opinion here, but allow me to just talk about what makes him so great for a second. I mean, he is someone who so much of the Buccaneers season last year was at the sort of the midpoint of the year when things weren't going well. They said, let's just start throwing it up to 13 and see if that works, and it worked pretty well. He gets double teamed so often, that opens up so much. He's double teamed on every play. He legitimately is double teamed on every play. The whole the New Orleans Saints, Lattimore kind of owns him narrative isn't untrue. Lattimore does play him well, but also a big part of it is because the Saints just know, take Mike Evans out of the game. There's constantly guys on Evans throughout the game. He very rarely has one-on-one opportunities in those situations. And even with that, is still able to put up, 1,000 yards year after year. Is one of the more consistent players we've ever seen. So, come on. I'm a Bucs fan. I'm not going to leave Mike Evans off my list. Let's just be honest. Number 7 on my list is Pro Football Focus's second highest graded wide receiver. So I don't quite have him that high, but maybe I'm wrong, to be honest, because he's always been a really good wide receiver and kind of underrated. I feel like people pay too much attention to, it's the Shanahan scheme, and don't factor in, there are plays where he's just one-on-one on the outside and blowing by the guy he's supposed to blow by. It's not all scheme. I do think that last year was a career year for him, so because of that, I'm not quite putting him that much higher. But again, I'm looking at this list. It's just crazy how deep wide receivers are. It almost feels like it's a mistake to not have him higher. You could, on my list, if you argue that he should be number 3, I get it. I don't think there's a big gap between them. He is that good. I just want to see it for another year. That's all. Number 6 on my list is also PFF's 6th highest graded wide receiver, someone who has, PFF has always graded him pretty high. He's been a top 10 graded player each of the last 3 years, and last year was the first time the box score stats really kind of, agreed with it, so to speak. He had 1,700 yards. Now, Again, how much of that was competition, getting to play in that division were not exactly the toughest defenses in that division. Like, is the Giants defense the best in that division outside of the Cowboys? It was a bit rough defensively last year, especially in the secondary, but it doesn't take away from what he's able to do. He is a true number one guy. And it's funny where I feel like every single Dallas player tends to get overrated. Somehow their superstar wide receiver is underrated, I feel like. How did that happen? How did we get there? Feels like he should be talked about as though he's like a god. Maybe I don't listen to Skip Bayless enough. Or I think I probably, if I don't listen to Skip Bayless enough, that's probably the right thing. But I don't know. But I feel like he's really good and still just 25 years old and has gotten better every year he's been in the league. So number 6 on my list. Number 5 is A.J. Brown, who, a guy that, again, I think, so he got banged up towards the end of last year, and that really, that sunk the team. He means so much to that Eagles team that once he got banged up, like, they were screwed, essentially. In that Tampa Bay game, they had nothing. I do think it's a different game if he's out there. I'm not saying they win, I'm just saying I think it's a different game. I do think it's fair to say maybe he saw a bit of a step back last year as opposed to 2022 where he was like amazing, for sure. But I still think he was really good last year, and he's still kind of similar to the Mike Evans thing of like, if you're seeing him not get 50-yard bombs, it's because there's safety over the top every play, basically. Like, that's just how it is. So definitely someone who you have to play differently when he's on the field, and he still finds ways to get yards, and still just 26 years old. That feels like he should be older, but no, just 26. So yeah, really good. Number 4, I did decide to go with Jamar Chase on my list, who again is kind of someone who, that first year was unreal, and then he hasn't quite lived up to that since then. I think that's fair to say, but I think a big part of it is like, yeah, that first year we kind of realized if you leave him one-on-one on the outside, he is going to, I don't care if it's Jalen Ramsey, he's going to get a 50-yard touchdown, and so you kind of had to say, okay, let's not do that, and since then, teams have, changed how they've played. We've seen a bit of a, not quite as much dominant yardage totals from him, but I still think we're seeing dominant play, and we still are seeing him put up really good numbers. And again, I think that, could I see him become the best receiver in football next year? Absolutely, I can see it. And even if he doesn't, he's still really good and only 24 years old. Number 3, so this might be a hot take, but I am still putting Davante Adams on my list. Adams had come off a stretch where he had like 5 or 6 amazing years in a row. Last year was not one of those years. It just wasn't. But I still think he had a really good year. And when you factor in the situation that was kind of around him last year, I'm not going to hold it against him too much. Again, I'm typically the last person to realize when a player is washed, so maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe he has lost a step. He is 31. But I just think his play style translates so well to even if he does lose a step, he'll be really good. So I'm not that concerned about it. I have him at number 3, but again, I can see why people might disagree with this take. Number 2, Justin Jefferson. Guy just got paid $1 billion, it feels like, and he deserves it. I mean, for his age, being as good as he is certainly a guy you have to change how you play. And, well, some of the guys I've talked about, like Mike Evans, like A.J. Brown, like Jamar Chase, you double-team the guy to hope, and then it sets up stuff, other guys get open, and you've done your job. Justin Jefferson, it's almost like you have to triple team him to really take him out of certain plays. What he can do, some of the catches he makes, and just how consistent he wins one-on-ones, is coming off of an injury, but what can be said about Jefferson that hasn't already been said? Totally worth the number 2 pick, and I think soon will be the number 1 pick, but not quite yet. I still do have a receiver ranked ahead of him. I am going Tyreek Hill is also Pro Football Focus's number 1 rated wide receiver. Obviously, there's some concerns about the guy's 30. If he does start to lose a step, his speed is so important. Like, how will that impact him? Totally fair to say. But it hasn't affected him yet, and he is still, we talk about guys who, okay, you don't want to leave this guy one-on-one on the outside. Tyreek Hill's a guy, Washington left him one-on-one on the outside, and pretty much unanimously, everyone was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's just like, it's not like something you shouldn't do. It's just like, it's like playing with 10 guys or something. Like, it's just like an obvious, this is not what you do ever type of play ever since that Tampa Bay game in 2020 in the regular season when he put up, 200 yards in the first quarter against a good corner in Carlton Davis, but doesn't matter. Don't leave him one-on-one. he's someone you have to play a very specific way. And I think he's shown that even with that, he's put up ridiculous numbers. Even with the, okay, you can't leave him one-on-one, he still was able to find ways to get down the field on double coverage, against zone coverage. I just think that he is such a game changer, and I think he's the best wide receiver in football still. And even though I think the Chiefs aren't necessarily regretting letting him go, winning back-to-back Super Bowls, you feel okay, I'm sure Dolphins fans are still very happy with the trade that they made. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. That's my list. So I'll give some honorable mentions because, like, it's crazy. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown not making this list is a crime. And Lions fans are, I get why you're going to be upset at me, but it's like, okay, but am I going to put him above Amari Cooper? Like, I don't think so. Like, I think Cooper's a little better, even though Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, is awesome. Like, Nico Collins was totally a top 10 wide receiver last year. I thought Jalen Waddle was pretty consistently in that area. Like, even, like, DJ Moore, you could argue about. I mentioned Puka Nacua. There's honestly plenty more. Again, like I said, there's 30 top 10 wide receivers, it feels like, but these are my best 10 of those. What do you think in the comments below? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.